Hello everyone, this is Edward off the beaten trail. Today is August 1st, 2023, and I'm here in the beautiful town of South Haven, Michigan, Lakeview Cemetery. I'm going to have a look at a couple points of interest here. The first person to be buried here in Lakeview was a veteran of the Civil War in 1870. He was also a captain. There are ship's captains buried here. There's a famous lighthouse keeper and many others. This is the older part of the cemetery. I've been here before a couple of years ago in the fall after the leaves were off the trees, and very interesting then. It's a beautiful place. We'll move along. I'll take a little walk through here. Lakeview, near South Haven, Michigan. Certainly the older part of the cemetery. Burials in the early 1900s, late 1800s. I believe this is 1872. It's 2 years after the first burial here. And we will continue. Well, folks, I'm here now in the newer part of the cemetery, and take a little walk along here for a second. Watering the lawns. This section here is yet to be used. Back here they have a nice little area of niches. The sheriff department is just on the other side of those trees. Take a little walk down here and visit a grave that photographs and so forth are online and shared with certain gravestone design sites all over the world. And that's this beautiful little log cabin. Jean and Virginia. I'll pause here for a second so that you can take a moment to pause and read. And again, this was all hand carved out of beautiful red granite. Jen and Jean. Even the detail of the logs on the inside of their individual headstones are carved with annual rings. And of course, there they are. Jen and Jane. We'll proceed to another very interesting gravesite. We just can't pass up the Yelding gravesite. A beautiful laser etching. The lighthouse, the South Haven Pier. Reminds me of the South Haven Pier. The South Haven Lighthouse stands by itself. And it doesn't have a little extension like this does, but it sure does bring the South Haven Lighthouse to mind. I'll stop by there before I go home, show you what I'm talking about, and we'll be right back. Well, folks, we're gonna take a little walk here and take a look at a witness tree that was here long before the white man came to this area. We'll look at a couple little graves here of very young folks. We're going to talk about aircraft as we walk up to the witness tree, about an aircraft that manufactured by the Douglas Aircraft Manufacturing Company, called the DC-4. They started making them in 1942 and they stopped in 1947. 1,245 of them were made. They had 4 engines. They were propeller driven. They're 1,450 horsepower each. They're Pratt & Whitney R2000 twin Wasp motors, famous during World War II. Of course, these planes were used during the war as transport and cargo planes, and then went back into the civilian service, the reason they were originally manufactured, flying passengers all over the United States. The cargo military version one of them at the Air Force Museum in Dayton is very, very famous, because in 1947 President Truman signed the Air Force into being with the National Defense Act of 1947. On that plane, named the Sacred Cow, the United States Air Force was born. Before Truman used it, and how it got its name, was Franklin Delano Roosevelt also used the plane. And it was so heavily guarded, people nicknamed it the Sacred Cow. Even used it to fly to the Yalta Conference near the end of the war. So after the war, the planes went back into the service, flying people all over the United States, different airlines. We're going to talk about one of those flights as we look at this beautiful witness tree. Again, well over 300 years old. On June the 23rd, 1950, one of these DC-4s owned by Northwest Airlines took off from LaGuardia Field near New York City. And it was on its way to Seattle, Washington, with a couple stops along the way. The first stop was in Minneapolis. The flight number was 2501. There were 55 passengers and 3 crew members on board. Horrendous thunderstorms were in their way as they came into the state of Michigan. They're directed kind of northwest, and they were flying at 3,500 feet. It was so bad, the pilot called the center and requested a lower altitude of 2,500 feet, which was granted. That request came in at a point about 18 miles north of Benton Harbor, Michigan. In the next few minutes, pardon me, they lost total contact with the airplane. Witnesses in South Haven at the shore heard the aircraft, and it seemed to them and sounded that the engines were sputtering and there was some trouble, that there was an aircraft in distress. And it wasn't long, and offshore ways, the witnesses seen a large flash of light, and even some things fall that were on fire. The weather was terrible, nighttime, and the search boats were able to get out. They were able to find some scraps of cloth, body parts. Not one complete body was ever found. Over the next days and so forth, more parts washed up on the beaches, South Haven, and even as far south as just north, actually, of Benton Harbor. The aircraft has never been recovered. They've looked for it. Even in 2022, the searchers couldn't find any traces of the debris. What they did find a couple of years before was the engine off a 747 that had come detached and fell off the aircraft into Lake Michigan, off South Haven over here a ways, and that big engine was laying on the bottom. And they found it, but they could not find Flight 2501. The people of South Haven gathered the remains, which needed to be interred, and so they brought them here to the cemetery. And right here is the mass grave of the victims of Northwest Airlines Flight 2501, June 24th, 1950. And of course, all the remains aren't here. Those that were gathered off the beach south of here, near Benton Harbor, are interred there in a cemetery, and they have a real nice marker that the city had purchased just a couple of years ago, and it has all the names of every one of the 55 passengers and the 3 crew on that dedication monument. But very few people know of this location. It's always been brought up that the remains are buried there in Benton Harbor, but not all of them. So with that, here today, in this beautiful, quiet cemetery near the shores of Lake Michigan, I'll end this part of the video, and we'll pick it up again down on the beach here in a couple of minutes and show you the lighthouse and the pier. The same lighthouse and pier, if you've watched some of my earlier videos, have the horrendous gales and storms, which the next time that we have them, I'm going to be better prepared, and I know you're going to love those videos. So just give me a minute and we'll take a look at the pier. Okay everyone, we're going to take a little video as we go past the yacht harbor here in South Haven and the entrance to Lake Michigan. It's the Black River. It's very busy. There is no parking spots available. Go up here around the beach. The big masted, the tall masted, I should say, and they're big too. Pirate ship is out there giving rides. Out of state. I'm just kidding. I'm from the state and I drive like I'm out of state. Sometimes people say I drive like I'm in a state. I'm not gonna argue with them about that. There's the pier. Yes, there's the pier right out there. Very nice out here today. The beach is, this is the South Beach. The North Beach, of course, is on the other side. Here's the parking police handing out the tickets. Ticky ticky. Most Ricky tick. They'll write those ticks. And we'll